Good afternoon everyone and welcome back to the Australian Reptile Park. My name's Jake. I'm back with another live stream, and today we're talking a little bit about probably one of my favourite groups of animals. Certainly one of my favourite groups of reptile, and that is lizards. And we're in a rather appropriate spot to be talking about lizards. We're right in front of our lace monitor pit. We've got quite a number of lace monitors behind me here in this exhibit. You can actually see a big boy just sitting on the rock over there, loving this afternoon sun on this late winter day. And these lace monitors during winter virtually disappear. We don't see them for a good 2-3 months, and then as the weather warms, of course, they emerge. And right now they've just come into their time where they're starting to bask again. They're starting to, drink and move around a little bit. And then in a few more weeks, when the weather gets a little warmer, especially those nighttime temperatures, that's when we will start to feed them again. Because these lace monitors, they're not feeding throughout the entirety of winter. Now, a very closely aligned species with the lace monitor is this one I've got right here in my hands. This is another species of Australian varanid or monitor lizard, and this one is known as the Spencer's monitor. Now, while the lace monitor is found along the east coast of Australia, right up the east coast, and is a very common lizard, this one here, not quite so common, not quite so well known. You find the Spencer's monitor in parts of Western Queensland and areas in the Northern Territory as well. Now, they don't get quite nearly as large. Those dingoes are going to interrupt us here for a moment. They don't get nearly as large as the lace monitor. In fact, a big male might get to about 4 feet in length, whereas a really large male lace monitor could exceed 6 feet. So not quite as large. They probably fall in that medium-sized monitor lizard category. And they act very differently to a lace monitor as well. If you've ever seen a lace monitor in the wild, you would have noticed that they're quite skittish, and the wild ones especially will typically head straight up the nearest tree to avoid you if they can. And that is where they spend a lot of their time. They'll bask in the trees, very adept climbers, whereas this species is more of a ground-dwelling monitor. They might climb a tree if they absolutely needed to, but where they live, there's not a whole lot of trees. They don't have a whole lot of choice as to where to live. In fact, where they spend most of their time is underground. So they're quite literally the opposite of the lace monitor. They're going the other end of the spectrum, right underground. And that is because where they're living is extremely harsh and arid and hot. In fact, during summer, where you find this Spencer's monitor, it can exceed 50 degrees quite easily Celsius. So they have to get underground in order to survive, and that is where they spend most of their time. Only coming to the surface to bask on suitable days, and of course they do need to feed as well, but this is a lizard that can go an extremely prolonged period without feeding. You see the wild Spencer's monitors, and often they can look incredibly skinny, quite emaciated. They've obviously gone a long time between meals. Out there, it's very much a boom and bust environment. They have really good years where they get a lot of rainfall and the food is abundant, but then they can have several years where you have drought, very little rainfall, and that is when the Spencer's monitors do it pretty tough. But whereas a mammal like a kangaroo might die in that situation, reptiles like the Spencer's monitor are really well adapted to that. As I mentioned, they can go very long periods without feeding, and if they're lucky, they can make it through that bad period, and once those good times roll around again, they'll just gorge themselves and on they go. Now, something you may have seen a couple of times here is that tongue. There it is, right on cue. Now, monitor lizards, they have a forked tongue, and it's very similar to a snake, and they use that tongue as a highly acute sensory organ. Just like we would use our eyes or our ears to work out what's going on around us, monitor lizards, they flick the tongue out, they pick up little scent particles in the air. You'll see our Komodo dragons doing it all the time when we're walking them out in the park, just like that, picking up, and that really gives them the best idea as to what is going on around them. Now, you can see beautiful eyes as well. They do have good eyesight, and in fact, some of the smaller monitors, and even some of the larger ones as well, actually have the ability to stand up on their back legs, and that enables them to have a really good look at what's going on around. We call that tripoding. They stand up like a camera tripod, and they can see what's going on if they want to get a better look at something. Now, we're going to say goodbye to this Spencer's because I've got a couple of other lizards to show you here. Let's pop him back in there. I thought what I'd do today to kind of mix it up a bit is I'd bring 3 different family of lizard. There is a lot of different families of lizard. The most numerous in Australia is our skinks. We have over 400 species of skink, but we also have a lot of geckos. We have around 175 or 180 species of gecko. Our largest going to get to about maybe 15-20 centimeters in length. We've got some fairly large ones, but nothing quite to the scale of what I'm about to show you. Let's proceed with caution. Let's see how we go here.
Why are you proceeding with caution, Jake?
Well, this is the New Caledonian giant gecko. They've got a very, very bad bite, very sharp teeth, and you may notice a little band-aid on my arm there, right next to his head, or on my hand rather, as I was getting this gecko ready to make his debut here on the live stream. Smashed me on the hand, bit of blood pouring out there a few minutes ago, so we quickly covered that up. And I certainly don't like the look of him heading towards my face, but we'll see if he's going to stay there and behave himself while I talk a little bit about them. Now, the New Caledonian giant gecko, they are found, of course, on the islands of New Caledonia. In fact, if you've been on one of those cruise ships, you often stop it off in New Caledonia. That's where you find these, really high in the trees. They are a canopy dweller, 10, 15, 20 meters up in the trees. And of course, they have a very large mouth, good for biting things, but what they're actually feeding on, they're not overly carnivorous. They will eat meat if you offer it to them, little mice and things like that. But what they're primarily feeding on would be fruit, nectar, tree sap. So they've got a little bit of a sweet tooth. And if we're lucky enough to see this gecko's tongue, you'll notice it's very different to the monitor lizard and quite similar to our own. It is a broad, fleshy tongue, and they actually use their tongue to do something pretty interesting. They'll actually use it to clean their eye. If you look at this gecko, you can look at it for as long as you want, forever. There we go. You'll notice they never ever blink. You're never going to beat this lizard in a staring contest because they do not have eyelids like we do. So what they do to lubricate the eye like we do when we blink, they will reach their large tongue outside the mouth, and every now and again they lick their own eye. He was doing a little lick there just on his snout, but I really want him to lick his eye. Let's see if he's going to do it. Tongue's still going, so we might get lucky. Well, while he's deciding what he wants to do, let's come down here and have a look at those feet. You'll notice on a gecko, they have really broad toe pads. Some of them do. And if we look, if I can get him off my shirt. If we look underneath those toes, you may see they have tiny scales that run parallel along the foot. And those essentially act like little mini suction cups. When those toes are pressed flat against something, the air is evacuated between those scales there, and that is what creates a force, and that enables the gecko to go anywhere he wants. He can go on your wall, go on your ceiling, glass, perspex, whatever they want. As you saw, he can climb straight up my arm, on my shirt, no worries whatsoever. Now, I'm not sure if we are going to get lucky with the eye lick, but that's all right. They do have a beautiful, beautiful face. You can see those eyes, quite stunning. They've got that beautiful yellow ring around the eye. They've got this mottled coloration along their body. Looks just like the lichen that you might see on a branch or the trunk of a tree. And as you can imagine, if you were over in New Caledonia and one of these was sitting right up in the tree, right up in the canopy, you would have virtually no idea that that gecko was sitting there.
Does that skin feel the same as the monitor you were holding before?
No, it's quite different. If we were to get a macro lens and look really closely at the skin, what you would notice is the scales are very, very tiny, maybe just 1 or 2 millimeters in width. And so what this gecko feels like is almost like velvet. They have a very soft, leathery skin. You can see I can kind of move it around a bit there with my finger. Very thin, quite delicate, as opposed to the quite rugged, rough skin of the monitor lizards and a lot of other family of lizard as well. All right, I'm going to pop this guy back in here. They do like to, of course, be hidden away during the day. Like most geckos, they are nocturnal, so he's going to head straight back into his cork bark tube there. And we actually just take that out of his enclosure, so we can just pop him straight back in after this. There's his little head. He's going to say goodbye. And, oh, there he goes. Of course, like most geckos, they are pretty well strictly nocturnal. They might sit out during the day up in the tree, but when they're moving around hunting, that's at night. They're strictly nocturnal. All right, and I've left the best for last. This is always a bit of fun. This is Chaos. And Chaos is our male Rhinoceros Iguana. Now you saw I had to be pretty quick there. He will swing around. He's got a big mouth, pretty sharp teeth, and I mean that New Caledonian giant gecko bite was pretty bad, but I would take 5 or 6 of those over one bite from this thing. He does have quite the set of chompers on him. Now these are, despite being a pretty grumpy species, one of my favorites. They are one of the rock iguanas, and there's a few different types of iguana. They're found in a few areas throughout the world. You have iguanas in Fiji. We have Fijian crested iguanas and Fijian banded iguana here at the reptile park. We also have green iguana from South America. That's that very well known, recognizable arboreal species. But there are quite a number of rock iguanas, this being one of them, found throughout the islands in the Caribbean. Now the Rhinoceros Iguana is called that because if we look right on the end of the snout, not too closely or you'll get bitten, but he does have a slightly raised scale there. It's kind of a projection on the end of the snout, and it does look a little bit reminiscent of a rhinoceros, of course the rhinoceros from Africa, the mammal. And as they grow, as the males mature, that'll just get larger and larger and larger. It doesn't end up looking like an actual horn, but it is quite reminiscent. Chaos here, he still has a fair bit of growing to do. He's by no means a big boy. You see some of those big 30, 40-year-old rhinoceros iguanas, the males at least. They are an incredibly large, stocky lizard. Now something that... Oh. Calm down, you're all right. Something that is quite common to see in pretty well all lizards is the process of shedding their skin or sloughing. And you can see just here on his back here, he's got a tiny little flap of skin. I can actually just peel that back like that. And what you'll notice, you gonna sit for me? Sometimes he likes to behave and sit in my arms like a bit of a baby, but I don't think he's gonna do that here today. You're all right, mate. Under that skin you saw is that beautiful fresh skin. Above, you can still see patches of it there. It's brown and dirty where he's been digging around in his exhibit. The rock iguanas, they're all quite prolific burrowers, so they do get quite dirty and dusty, but underneath, when they shed that skin, they expose that beautiful fresh skin. In fact, one of the most beautiful lizards in the world, in my opinion, and very closely related to the Rhinoceros iguana, they're in the same genus, Cyclura, the blue iguanas, the blue caiman iguana. Just a stunning, stunning lizard. They look very similar, a little bit smaller, and they are a beautiful turquoise blue, really, really bright blue. Now, Chaos here, let's just see if he's gonna sit here on the ground. There we go. He might calm down a little bit now. And we might answer some questions while Chaos hides behind the boxes. Or maybe I'll pop him back.
Yeah, you can pop him back if you want, if he's more comfortable. Does it hurt lizards when they're shedding their skin?
It doesn't hurt, no, and it's a very natural thing for them to go through. Depending on the age of the lizard or the size, will depend on how frequently they're doing it. So a smaller lizard that's growing more rapidly would shed their skin more frequently, whereas the larger lizards, they do it less frequently. But it's not hurting them at all. It's a very natural process.
This might be a bit of a topical question, but can lizards be venomous?
They can be venomous, yes. And I mean, there's 2 true species of venomous lizard that we've known about for a very long time, and those are the Gila monster and the beaded lizard. Both of those are found in the southwestern United States and also Central America. And they're beautiful, beautiful lizards in their own right, but they are venomous. They do have quite sharp teeth. They do have a venom gland in the lower jaw, and if they bite you, they can inject venom. Now, there is a bit of, conjecture and debate as to whether monitor lizards are also venomous. And what we've noticed is if you were to open up the jaw or the head of a monitor lizard, you do see glands in the lower jaw, the same as what you would see in those, the Heloderma, the Gila monster and the beaded lizard. But a little bit different. as is the case with the Gila and the bearded lizard, they don't have an amazing venom delivery system. So there's no venomous lizards that are like a venomous snake with hypodermic fangs and the ability to inject venom really easily. All the venomous lizards can really do is chew that venom into the wound. So it's a little bit more of a rudimentary system than we see in the venomous snakes.
This is a bit broad across all lizards, but how old can they get? That's a very broad question.
Very broad. Some lizards, some of our small Australian dragon species and chameleons are another one, can have very, very short lifespans. I'm talking like 12 months. Others, like the Rhinoceros Iguana we just saw, Komodo dragons, 40, 50 years. So it is extremely variable. But on average, a lot of species do live between 10, 20, 30 years.
Can people have lizards as pets?
They can, certainly. There's a lot of lizards that you can keep both here in New South Wales and other states of Australia. It does vary a little bit depending on which state you're in as to which species you can have. But as a general rule, things like blue tongues, bearded dragons, other small dragon species, frilled dragons, are very common in the captive trade, and a blue tongue especially, I think, is probably the best first lizard if you were going to jump into reptile keeping.
Do lizards make noise?
They can make noise, yeah. Again, it depends on the species. Some can hiss very loudly, especially some of the larger monitor lizards. They can suck in a heap of air and then exhale. They can make a very loud hiss. Some geckos can actually make a bit of like a high-pitched barking sound. So, yeah, a lot of them can make noise. Most of them will only do it if they're feeling threatened or distressed.
And last question, what's your favourite species of lizard?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious if you've ever heard me talk about them, but Komodo dragons are easily my favourite species of lizard. I do like all the monitor lizards, and I really like geckos as well. I've spent a lot of time travelling right throughout Australia looking for a lot of different geckos, but there's something else about Komodo dragons that just sets them apart. And yeah, I'm very fortunate to work with our two here at the Reptile Park, which I'm sure you've seen in other videos before. Now, guys, I hope you enjoyed taking a bit of a glimpse at just 3 of the lizard species that we work here with at the Reptile Park. We've got a lot of them. We cannot wait to open back up and show you more and more and more. We love having you guys back here. We can't wait for that day when we can open back up. But for now, hope you're enjoying these live streams. We'll continue them and we will see you next time. Thank you, guys.